Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Authors on Mission podcast. Today, I have a question for you. What if I told you that the most logical, analytical minds sometimes become the most powerful bridges to the spiritual realm? What if the very skills that make someone an exceptional engineer, attention to detail, methodological thinking, problem solving, are exactly what's needed to navigate the mysteries between worlds? Well, today we're diving deep into a story that will change everything you think about life, death, and the connections that transcend both. We're going to have a chat about a tale that begins with DNA testing and a psych's prediction, winding through a bunch of other interesting details, and of course accumulating to the writing of a wonderful book. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest today, Tammy Young, the author of Afterlife Bonds, How Spirit Communication Turned My Grief into a Journey of Joy. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare for the beautiful, mysterious, and ultimately healing world of spirit communication with somebody who's lived it, learned from it, and now teaches others to find their own connections to the divine. Tammy, it's so great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What a great introduction. That's wonderful.
I'm glad you think so. I mean, we've got to set the stage, right? And, what better way than to immerse our listeners in exactly what it is that your book is all about. So, yeah, I would love to just get started a little bit by chatting a little bit more about you and kind of what led you to writing your book. I mean, obviously it was through lived experience, but I'd love to start off with, was there a moment that made you decide, you know what, I have to put this on the pages?
Yeah, so I worked as an engineer for years, and it kind of over a period of time decided to kind of, I would say, what would be a good way to say, I was very interested in the spiritual side of things. I knew that there was something more going on around me. So I began to look more and more into that side of the world, and I just found, pretty much left the engineering behind and really delved into that. I, for years, took classes, learned different things, and interestingly, things began to happen with me as far as like being in a situation where my skills were needed. And that really pushed me forward to kind of acknowledging that this is real and it is real life. It's around us, and using these skills in the world that we live in is really pretty valuable, I think, for all of us. So I guess I would just say the book came along because, like, at one point I even thought I was looking at writing children's books because I really felt like that would just be so fun and so interesting. I have 2 children of my own, and I thought, those were some of the best times of our lives, was sitting down and reading those books before bedtime. So I was sort of like getting used to the idea of what does publishing look like? What does it mean to write a children's book? And sort of not completely out of the blue, but I found out I had a brother that I didn't know about. And it was really through the experience of all my own emotions, the emotions of joy. Oh my gosh, I have this brother. This is amazing. To all the experiences that came after that, the heartache and the pain, and then the eventual joy again. But what led me to write that was 2 things. It was the fact that I was experiencing this outrageous idea of, here I was, 60 years old, finding out I had a brother that I never knew about before. That was so joyous. But then I also found that things were happening on my psychic mediumship side. And I had just started even journaling like dreams. So all of this was coming together, and part of that, because I do work with my guides, we all do, whether we know it or not, but I felt led by my guide to actually, this needs to be a book. And at one point, they showed me a book on the side, and then on the bind, on the the binding portion of that was like the title of the book, which was something different that was Matt, my brother. And so, yeah, I felt like the experience led me there, along with the support of my guides and my own experiences. So
it's very interesting how this all sort of came about for you too, though. I was reading the book, and you start almost immediately with a very suspenseful story about how the psychic originally was asked you if you had three brothers, and I like the way you crafted that story, specifically because you kind of went from saying, I only have one brother. What are you talking about? To reaching out to your second brother, and you eventually together realized, wait, we have a third, and from there and so forth, this story just unravels. But I think it's great the way you told this story is, just in a natural way that made us curious, wanting to know what happened next, and also just relating to every character in your book. So it's great that you were able to weave that part of your memoir into it while also making it a self-help book by teaching us too. So very cool the way you structured it is what I'm trying to say.
thank you very much. That was also just a kind of a big, when I finally was at the point where where I would roughly say the experience was over, but it's never really over, right? But when I got to the point where I felt like, well, I feel like our book is towards the end, it was just very interesting. Yeah, just the way all of that happened, how it so naturally comes that way. And when you talk about, what am I writing? Am I writing memoir? What am I writing? And the whole idea of I had written a story, and I realized if you were someone that was in the middle of something like this and you had lost a loved one, I didn't want to just leave you in this story and then you'd finish the book and be like, oh, okay. I wanted to make sure that there was some opportunity there to, if you felt called to do a little more work or really try to connect with the loved ones that you were grieving, that you had this opportunity. So that's why there's kind of this hybrid memoir teaching thing that happens all together, because I didn't want to just leave people there.
Right, and thank you for sharing that process with us. I'm sure it must have been a tough decision to figure out what direction to go in. You could make it a memoir, you can make it a self-help, maybe even a how-to, but I think you wove it perfectly together. That being said, was there a lot of outlining involved, or did you kind of just speak from the heart based on your memories of it all? I'm just kind of curious about how it all came to be.
Yeah, so because I was writing children's book, I was sort of in the habit of just sitting down and typing, right? And just sort of, in some ways, just typing. And so as I went through that process, my emotions would be on the page. But as this experience progressed, that was only 6 months long from the time I met my brother till the time he passed, the things that were going on were just so emotional and such a roller coaster that for me, the best way to get the information out was to sit and write. And I just cried and cried and cried. And then I would read it again and I'd cry. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely getting to the heart of what happened. So that really was my process. At the point where I felt like, okay, I've sort of encompassed what has gone on, I found out, through Hay House, there's kind of this program you can join to find out how to write a book, because I had no idea, but I had all this material. And one of the things they talk about is hero's journey, which I'm sure all of you understand, but I did not. That wasn't part of my engineering curriculum. So when I looked at what that outline looked like, I was really shocked that was my experience. It fell into place with all of those markers that you would hit per chapter. So yeah, I pretty much wrote as I lived it, and then it was pretty much just making it make sense. I did go back and add those exercises and sort of second thoughts because of the way it sort of comes out. I want people to have hope, is my point.
Right. And I think the best way that you are able to give others hope is to share your own. And of course, not just your hope, but your vulnerability also. It's just something you've done very authentically and very well, sharing family trauma, spiritual experiences, grief. So I think a lot of authors can benefit this. How do you find the courage to be so open, and what is that like for you during the writing process, and for your family for, adding on to that too?
Yeah, I love that term, throwing up on the page. I definitely threw up on the page. I cried on the page. I pretty much just My point to that was that I really need to set up and show my emotion. And if during our editing process, it's not as the way that I felt, you know what I'm saying, because you can't always go through every little moment. But I needed that to be on the page. That really was, I want to show you what happened. And so with that, I felt like I was my most authentic for sure. But I also think when you work in sort of the spiritual, whether you're doing psychic mediumship, things like that, like you kind of live on that level, right? I mean, you're pretty open, right? So that's just sort of how things are for me. And yeah, when all of this started, both my parents were alive. And then maybe a year or two later, my father passed. And then about 2 weeks before my book launched, my mother passed. So by the time the book launched, the only person there was my existing mother, me, and well, that was it. It was just two of us. So yeah, it was, to me, it's the only way to do it, especially something like this when you're talking about people passing and moving to the next, realm. What is there left but really to be a soul level person, right?
Right. Well, of course, though, it's another layered challenge because you were writing at the same time everything was happening too in real time. Is that correct also? So I'm sure that was another layer as well, which, yeah, I mean, that's very interesting to think about too, just the writing process as it's all occurring. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I felt it was probably one of the easiest things I'd ever done because I was in the moment that I was writing for the first time about events, or even the second time if I went back and looked at what I had written. It really was making it complete. Like, what did I feel? What were the people around me feeling? What did I think, right? I mean, all of those things, I just wanted it to be, it's funny, I keep seeing the word beefy, and I never use that word. So I'm just going to tell you that I'm being led with that word, beefy.
That's funny. So when that happens to you, that sort of thing where you come up with a new word that you never use, beefy, for example, is that kind of leading way into these communications that you speak of in the book?
Yes.
Like a new word just pops into your head like that. Is that an example of it?
That's a great example because, and I saw that 2 or 3 times before I said that to you. But we all have these moments, and we are all capable of just opening up and being vulnerable to those spirits and our loved ones around us, being able to communicate with them. But that's the way you sort of know, wait a minute, that's not my word. There's times when I don't even know what the word means, and I have to look it up. And I am always amazed at what a better word that is than anything that I could have come up with or even knew about, So it's definitely part of the process.
For sure. And it goes right into the direct content of your book too. I mean, for example, you mentioned that Matt's humor is one way that you communicated with him after the fact too. So I'm wondering, why do you think personality traits like that or words like that do shine through when you're communicating to the spirits?
I love that question because it goes right to evidence, right? So
okay.
In my own personality and my own realm of mediumship and psychic, everything was very, there just wasn't any humor. That's probably the best way to put it. It was just very concentrated and serious and, that kind of stuff. So in my meditation, I did a lot of meditating around the relationship with Matt and during the time he was with us and we lost him. But there were times when I was just like at my bottom, just really upset, crying beside myself. And all of a sudden, like I just told you, I saw the word beefy. He would show me silly characters. And I would be like, what is that? And I think when he realized that we are connecting that way, he continued with that. So there is this sort of constant ebb and flow of like being happy and then being sad again. And you see that when there's a sadness, he jumps in with something just ridiculous. I think at one point he showed me half of an elf and he showed me the little striped shoes and the pointy ends turning up. He just does all kinds of things. Now to say that relationship and how he communicated with me changed over the book. But I love that he did that for me.
Right, definitely. And this is very fascinating to think about in general too. It's great that you have that, connection and that experience with Matt, but that's only one of them. So I think all of our listeners today are, very fascinated with what you mentioned here. And of course, everybody, if you're more curious, Tammy does outline everything she's mentioning in the book within the first couple chapters too. But that's not the only example that you do mention in the book. There's lots of others too. So I'm wondering perhaps you could treat our audience with maybe a sneak peek of one of these others that you mentioned. I don't want to give too many away, but again, for example, go ahead, please.
No, I'm going to ask you to give me one because I can only think of one, and it's kind of a bigger one. So tell me which one you were.
Right. So there was one that had to do with, saving a child I was reading for. I'm looking through my notes here. A missing child, sorry. Because you were a missing child called Tyler.
Yes.
Yes. So I know that must have been both terrifying, validating. Share a little bit about that. How did it come to be? What was the process like of relaying that into the book as well?
So the interesting thing was that situation occurred sort of early on in my, I'm going to say, psychic career, because I knew these things were happening around me, but I had never gone to a class or really even connected with anybody. What I had done was do a lot of reading. I mean, all kinds of reading. And I just thought, oh, I can imagine that. Oh, okay. But then one day, my son had a friend over, and they were at schools that were a little far. They were at his school together, but it was farther away from both of the kids' homes. So that boy came to our house. They had a lot of fun. The next day, his mother calls me and says, I just want to know if my son said anything to your son because he's missing. And in Texas, we had something called an Amber Alert. And she's like, oh, what do you know? And I looked at my son, and he looked at me, and we were both just so sad and scared and all this. And I said, well, so we got in the car, drove around a little bit. And then finally had to come back home. And I said, I mean, this just tugs at my heart. It probably tugs at everyone's heart. But I thought the only thing I can do, the only thing that I have left is to try to go like psychic. I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to try this. So I just sat down in the corner of my room off to the side, and I had a big picture of this boy, because now it's an Amber Alert. It's on TV. It's, it's on the news. And so I pulled this up, and I just looked in his eyes, and I just said, I know that you can hear me. Just show me what you're seeing. And I actually had done this before in another case that was going on, and I just tried this technique, and I know that it works. So I just said, show me what are you seeing in your own eyes? Just show me. And I start getting these pictures. So this is the first time I've done this. So I'm like, well, I'm going to draw what I see because maybe it means something. I don't know. So I do all this, and I end up, and I actually went to lunch with a friend real quick because it was her birthday, and I came back home. But during the process of sitting, waiting for her, something happened with me where I realized when I was looking at this vision of this boy and asking him to show me, I kept seeing like a bush or reeds or something like that. That's all I could see. And I've finally realized as I was sitting in the car waiting for my friend, I said, oh, I think I need to ask him to back up. So so I can see what kind of reads, right? All this kind of stuff. So so I feel like I get this next vision. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm talking to my friend. I'm like, I got to go back home. So by the time I get home, of course, it turns out he's back home. His mother calls me the next day. He's home. It's all good. I said, as an engineer, I really want to have evidence. Can you just tell me where he was all together? We went to this spot. The boy had left his house, gone to this spot, and we walked in through some bushes at a trail that winded down to a road. And as I stood there, I could see these sort of reeds off to one side. And as I turned to walk, I saw this, it's like a stone. I know that he stood there because I could see everything. And his mother said, oh, I don't think he was there. Because I said, I think he stood on this stone. She goes, oh, no. She goes, I think he went down this path. So I went to walk down there and I'm like, this doesn't feel like it. So she goes, oh, okay. So as I walk back to the stone, she comes back up the path and says to me, oh my gosh, I can see the orange peel that he sat on this stone and told me he had for lunch. And so
Oh,
as I
wow.
looked over that stone, I could see that orange peel there. And so that was like, oh my God, that just means that what we all try to do in these moments of cold cases or, psychic awareness, like whatever this is, it works, right?
Yeah.
So then, of course, trying to put this down on the page, right? The first time I wrote it, of course, I wrote every little nuance, but not everyone wants to read every little nuance, right? So I think that you write it for the first time in its fullness or its beefiness, and then you've got to come back and really get the poignant pieces of that.
Yeah, I understand that a lot. And that's first off a crazy story, especially finding that orange peel at the end. Like, I think that's kind of inspiring for anybody to know that such resources are out there if we do like learn a little bit more about it. And of course, your book is a great testimony to it, so we can learn a little bit more. And really, thank you for sharing that story about how you wrote it too, about how you have to kind of go back and write it first and add more. That is what you were referring to, right? Kind of a first draft, second draft type thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the top methods. Of course, you just got to get it out there first, and you add on, you refine it. Tammy, so all of this being said, have you considered working on a follow-up book? I'm wondering if you have any other stories that are being, you're being called to write about right now. What's next for you is what I'm trying to ask.
I love that question because I have moved to Washington State away from Austin, Texas. And I've looked at this place for a number of years and I love it and I think it's amazing. But all of a sudden the house popped up and I said, I need to go. I feel drawn to this place. And so I'm looking for signs and synchronicities, and I have found so many of them. And as I talk with my friends, of course, my crazy friends are on the same path with me, and they're like, what's next for you? I feel like there is a book that is sort of bubbling and kind of having to do with this idea of, no matter what's going on around you, you really need to be following your soul essence in your life, because I feel like your life is about experience. It's not about money and material things and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot to this process that's occurred, the synchronicities of finding the people just when you need them, things being there when you didn't think you had them, and all of a sudden they're there. Yeah, it's something I feel like around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. I mean, I think we're all excited to learn a little bit more, especially after today's conversation. Everybody, definitely go ahead and check out that book, the first one, and then also be on the lookout for this next one. I'm wondering, what's the best way to get in contact with you and stay up to date with any updates with this, or when we could be, looking forward to seeing it on the shelves? What's the best method to stay in touch?
You can find me at tammyyoungmedium.com. I'm also on Facebook as Tammy Young Psychic Medium. And I'm also on Instagram at TY Medium.
Okay. Well, there you have it, everybody. We're going to put the links to all of those in the description box of this podcast today. So when we do finish up, which isn't quite yet, but check it out, click over on those links, and just get informed, because I personally think, this is something we could all benefit from. Whether or not we, can do these practices ourselves, it's great to know that it's out there and that it's a way for anybody, especially if you're, in need to learn to communicate, right? So I love it. Tammy, I'm wondering, what other tips might you have to offer to our writers here on the podcast today? Anybody who might also be dabbling in a similar topic such as this, what kind of advice would you give to them if they're writing their own books?
I would tell them to be brave. Be honest. What you're seeing, what you're saying, what you're feeling, write it. I feel like our whole sort of vibration is changing, and where we used to like, oh, nobody's going to listen to me, or this isn't going to sell. Never believe that, because I feel like our whole vibration is changing. Everybody wants to know a lot more about, that ending that we all go through no matter what. So I just would tell people, be brave, do your thing. Like if you make choices from the heart, it's going to work for you.
Yeah, definitely. So there you go. Make choices from the heart. Don't be afraid. Don't hold back just because you're worried about what somebody might say. Just, get out there and write it. And then, of course, go back, add to it, validate it, and make it exactly what it needs to be, whether it's memoir or self-help or anything in between. So I love that. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
So yeah, no, this has been a great conversation. We learned a little bit about you, a little bit about the book. Do you happen to have a copy of it with you today, by the way?
I do. Can I show that to you?
Yeah, let's take a look. There it is. I love it. And when I first saw it, I was curious. Is that you?
It is.
It is. Okay, I love it.
And then there's a shadow that's Matt.
Mm.
But this was taken by my niece who lives in Sitka, Alaska. And so I had the opportunity to go there on a cruise with one of my sons. And I asked her if we could do something. And she is an amazing photographer. And it was a really rainy day and she just did an amazing job with it. So
That's beautiful. I like that story of how you created it. It was made specifically for the book, and great that it was like a rainy day, perfect atmosphere for it, and eye-catching too. It's something that draws the audience to it, and they're more likely to pick it up and learn a little bit more about, okay, what's this shadow on the cover? You're really clever. I like it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real treat chatting with you about all these really awesome things. So thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've had a great time. Thank you, Danielle.
Of course. And, to all of our listeners out there today, if you are also interested, if you've resonated with Tammy's journey and her story, whether you're also dealing with grief or feeling called to explore your own intuitive abilities, or maybe just seeking a deeper understanding of what lies beyond the physical realm, you can connect by checking out the links in the description box, by picking up a copy of Afterlife Bonds for yourself, and just seeing what's out there, because the world is endless. Don't be afraid. Just, as Tammy said, just get out there, write your own story. If you're so inspired, don't let anything hold you back. So yeah, until next time, keep writing your story, keep following your mission, and remember that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences come from simply being brave enough to listen to when life calls you towards something completely unexpected. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.